Joining us now with more on Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, but also the disastrous foreign policies. The former Secretary of State, Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Okay, so we leave our weapons. We beg the Taliban not to take over or hurt our embassy in Kabul. And we're urging the Taliban to think about their role in the international community. Mr. Secretary, please tell me that they know more than that, because that is a fundamental lack of basic knowledge about who the Taliban is, who they have been, and what they're capable of.
Well, Sean, thanks for having me on the show tonight. It looks at best naive, at worst ignorant. Our understanding of the Taliban was very clear. We had a conditions-based plan for how we were going to get our young men and women back home. We were going to accomplish both missions. We were going to get our soldiers back, and we were going to make sure that this kind of thing that you're seeing happen today could not happen, which is a breeding ground for what could potentially be terror attacks coming from this very place. I'll never forget the president saying, you have two missions, Mike. You've got to go deliver. You've got to get these folks out. We've got to have an orderly plan and execution leadership to actually do that. And then second, you got to make sure that we're never attacked from this place. We're now, just a little bit less than a month away from the 20th anniversary of when Al-Qaeda came and attacked our homeland. We never want that to happen from Afghanistan again. And so we'd begun to prepare, Sean. We'd started to withdraw from our embassy in Kabul. I'd issued that set of orders. President Trump himself made clear to the Taliban leadership, touch an American, we're going to come hard and we're going to come fast. And from February 29th on, when we got the first set of understandings with the Taliban, we didn't have a single American killed by the Taliban. That's 11 months straight, the longest time in an awfully long time in Afghanistan. Sean, deterrence works, weakness begets war, and you see what weak leadership ultimately leads to. And I hope we're successful at achieving those two missions, and I hope there's no Americans harmed as we head down this next several weeks and months.
Yeah, well, I think it's inevitable now what's going to happen in Afghanistan. Sadly, let's take make a whip around the globe if we can. Let me talk about China. First of all, very few people seem to be talking about China and Russia arming the #1 state sponsor of terror, Iran. More importantly, we have the Chinese lecturing Secretary of State Blinken on human rights in Anchorage. I have a problem with that. Next, we have the Chinese government literally threatening U.S. and Japanese military bases, and they're talking openly about what they're calling reunification with Taiwan. And America now must get permission to land our military airplanes at our allied country, Taiwan. China wants to grant us permission to do that. Reunification, is that what you would call the takeover of Taiwan? That's not exactly the words I would use.
No, Sean, it's not reunification. Taiwan has never been part of the Chinese Communist Party's place or space or sovereignty. But you see, Sean, by the way, these two are connected. When you have weak American leadership, when there's red lines drawn and you fail to follow through on them, that happened in the Obama administration with Vice President Biden sitting right at his side. When you're not resolved, when you don't have peace through strength like Reagan or the deterrence model that the Trump administration's built out, the Taliban sees weakness in China and Russia. The Russians see weakness with respect to the Taliban and the Iranians and these bad actors, whether it's Maduro in Venezuela. The list goes on, Sean. These folks can sense that America is apologizing, that it is begging the Taliban to get some assistance so we can please get our Americans out of Afghanistan. This is a dangerous understanding to be flowing around the world, and you can see the impact. It's Chinese aggressiveness, it's the Iranians enriching their nuclear weapons. All of the things that you have spoken about are a direct result of America failing to lead and put America first in the way that the Trump administration did.
Let me go to Russia. Hostile regime, hostile actor in Vladimir Putin. There's no ambiguity about that. I would argue, and we'll get into more detail, that the Bidens are compromised based on the money that Hunter Biden got and his admission that they have compromising materials, as Adam Schiff said. But let me ask you, so we see the Russian hacks, cyber attacks against this country. Joe Biden then grants Vladimir Putin a waiver to build his pipeline to do a multi-billion-dollar deal with our Western European allies while simultaneously canceling our own Keystone XL pipeline and eliminating high-paying career jobs, and then offers him a summit. And I'm trying to understand why we would reward that behavior. Can you explain it?
This is bad national security policy and bad economic policy. Sean, I'm headed this weekend to actually go to Kansas to speak to the Kansas Independent Oil and Gas Association. President Biden's making it impossible for them to keep their employees, to build their businesses, and then he's demanding the tyrants like the Iranians and the Russians, produce oil so that we could buy it from them. This makes absolutely no sense. It's bad for American workers. It's bad for the American economy. It's terrible from a national security perspective, as we had delivered an American energy independence where we were shipping these products, natural gas and oil, around the world. We should be producing at home and exporting, not begging others to import so we can have cheaper gas prices when inflation is running rampant in our own country.
Well, giving up energy independence was, now we're begging OPEC to produce more oil. We actually will get to that with Rick Perry in a second. Last question. We know about Obama and Biden's deal with the Iranian mullahs and cargo planes full of cash and other currency. They dropped there. Now we pressure the South Koreans to give the mullahs in Iran $7 billion. Can you think of a good reason why anybody would do that? And as a result, we see even more enrichment of uranium?
No good reason. We prevented that very $7 billion from being transferred from the South Koreans to the Iranians for our entire time in office. It was the right thing to do. It put pressure on the Iranian regime. It protected our friend and ally, the state of Israel. It made the Gulf states prepared to enter into the Abraham Accords. Now we're going to try and buy off the mullahs in the same way that apparently we're trying to buy off the Taliban. This is bad foreign policy. It'll put Americans at risk, Sean.
All right, Mr. Secretary. Well, it's finally great to have an adult weigh in on foreign policy, because this is a disaster, and America is going to pay dearly down the road, and probably sooner than later. I worry for our country. Thank you, sir.